Welcome to the Better Learning Podcast. My name's Kevin Stoller, host of the show, and we're always looking at how we can improve education from a variety of different aspects. We've been really digging into the furniture aspect and how much it impacts the space over some recent episodes, and I've been having a lot of conversations. So that's why my guest today, Amanda Hastings. Amanda, how are you doing?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and so why don't you give a little bit of just like your intro and the firm you're with and what your role is, and then we're just going to go back because we were having conversation, and that's really I want
Yeah.
to get back to really just the conversational part of it.
I am a senior interior designer at the Slam Collaborative based in Connecticut. We have firms all over the country, but mostly the public ed work that we do, K-12 schools, is in Connecticut and out of our Rhode Island office, Connecticut office, mostly just Connecticut and Rhode Island are where we focus. I've been working on public ed for most of my career, so probably like 18 years or so. And again, mostly Connecticut. Um, and yeah, it's become one of those things where I just kind of fell into doing schools because the firm I worked for before did it. And then it just has become a passion of mine where now I solely do K-12 public school work. And it is something that I'm definitely passionate about, like the learning environments and the furniture aspects of that. Last year, I completed the ALEP program, which was tremendously insightful. And it kind of blew my mind that, like, how do you get to this point in your career where you're working on schools so far? And there was so much information there to learn. And, it kind of makes you feel bad of like, oh my God, I wish I had known this like 15 years ago and was working, towards these things at that point, understanding the reasons why behind everything that we're doing. So at this point, I really feel like it's important for me to share that knowledge with either other designers in my firm or definitely with the clients, but like would love to like find a way to kind of bring more of the information out to the general public, because I just feel like not everybody understands what we do, why we do it, and how the classroom is impacted by design.
I love it. Yeah, perfect. And we had talked because I wanted to interview a lot of people, not on the podcast, just I've been interviewing like I think I'm at like somewhere in the mid upper 30s or 40 of people just being like, hey, from your perspective, what's the best practices of the projects that you're doing? What's the best way to make sure that the furniture is incorporated so that the intent of the space and the culture and the teaching and the pedagogy, everything aligns. So when they go into that space, that it really makes the impact that we're seeking. And you were the ones that we were getting pretty deep in the weeds. So I'm like, we need to really get the details in on an episode like this. Um, so I was just starting to tell you before we recorded this, one of the things that I'm gotten from it is that um, we did a three-part series that's going to be coming out. By the time this one goes, it will be there so people can go back and listen to it. Of really looking at the why it matters and then more of like the how and some of the best practices. But what I've been landing on, it does feel like the the best case scenario is typically when it is a team collaborative approach and that furniture is really looked at very early in the process. And
100%. Yeah.
and,
Yes.
and it sounds like, yeah, your view on that is very similar on that. What I mean, from your point of view, like what's the best case for you? Like if you were going to guide a district through this, how would you guide them through the
Um,
process?
I think so. First, I'm going to say when I first started working on schools, a lot of times like the interior designers wouldn't even be involved until like all the spaces are laid out. You're coming in halfway through the design, and that to me, I'm like, how is that helping? Like the furniture is not something that should just follow the design. It should be helping to guide it. So like whether you're setting up a classroom or an office or a media center, catering that design to what that space is so important. So like I think that has definitely evolved with the work that I've been doing, and this was a long time ago. So like being an advocate for getting interior designers and the people that are doing the programming and planning involved very early on, and making sure that they are part of that space planning and before, like maybe even before you're talking with the client, just using your best practices to kind of figure out how do these spaces work, so that when you do have those initial conversations with the client, you've already brought the design to a certain point where you know how it functions, you know how, this as essence of like a media center, so you can talk them through what you're showing to have that conversation. But I feel like sometimes, if the design doesn't have the ability to bring that conversation to life, that's where you're struggling at first. So making sure that you truly are embedded in the design from the beginning to be able to have those
So
conversations with
so
clients.
how early?
Me, I'm usually when the project starts, when we go to the interview is when we kind of start having
Yeah.
that conversation. And then, when it's SD, the beginning of very schematic designs of just working with our programmers. They do a lot of the space planning and just even making sure they understand what the size of a classroom needs to be, what you need in there to have those dynamic layouts, that if desks are all just facing forward in a room, like you might not need as much space as you do if you're moving them around and having flexible furniture. So really making sure that everyone who's working on the project understands the why you need certain square footage, or why you need visibility to the media center, or visibility to other places to kind of activate those things. um, I think so very early on, as soon as we start the project,
Yeah.
we're having those
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah. So, so as I've been talking to people and just coming off learningscapes and, and when we're recording this, we're heading into ed spaces. Like it's all like, I feel like this is a topic that just keeps coming up and when probably because I'm bringing it up, but, but also because I feel like it is like, we're at that moment in like the
Gaining
industry.
momentum.
Yeah. We're getting this momentum, like where if you would have said 10 years ago, like, these newer products were coming out and like we were recognizing that they make an impact and we were putting it in, but then the teachers weren't kind of coming along, and now I feel like we're addressing that was recognized, and now we're doing a better job as an industry of getting the teacher voices and bringing them along on professional development. So now I feel like the last step to like really get this is how do we kind of get the team approach to go in earlier, to do
Mhm,
this, and
mhm.
it really comes around like just that earliest conversation of like, let's be talking
Yeah.
about furniture
It,
very early.
for us, it definitely helps when you have a school district, or you have a city that's already up on that information and they're pushing for it. So it's much easier obviously when you don't have to educate everybody that's on the project for like, why is this so great? When they come to you with that makes it so much easier. So we've definitely seen more push. Like for example, a Rhode Island project that we just did, I just had to write an entire letter um, to be submitted with my furniture package to explain to them the entire process along the way, and how we engage staff, and what we did to make sure that they were educated. And that's a new thing. Like we've never had to do that with any of our furniture packages before. So now it's being brought from that state review to say, hey, this is important and we want to make sure that you're doing it, so show us how you did that. So that to me is exciting, because it doesn't feel like you're out here just like pushing for it and on your own, that really it's coming
Yeah.
from the important people that are funding these projects. So
Yeah, I always use this like that bell curve, that if you look at like an industry, like a product life cycle, like I felt like, like had like kind of those trendsetters and then the early adopters, and now we're at the point where if we're not at the early majority, we may even be further along, where I think this is like the majority is
mhm, mhm.
recognizing what's going on, which is exciting. Um, so this is where I'm at, and I'd love to get your take on this. I feel like there have been two camps of when it actually comes down to more of like the mechanics of how furniture is approached on a project. There's kind of the camp that I would say is more kind of the more traditional approach of like, we're going to build a spec and we're going to bid it out, and that's typically going to be like roughly 6 months prior to a school opening. So, like maybe they'll get a little further ahead. Maybe it'll be 9 months. But, and then there's this other camp that's more of like, we're going to pick our partner early on. We're going to do some type of evaluation and pick our partner first before we pick the products. Have you had experience with either one of those, or is yours typically some type of hybrid of that?
Mostly a little bit of a hybrid. Mostly bidding, a lot of times it comes from the client. They sort of dictate what it is. In Connecticut, you have the option of either using a state contract or going to bid. But you're limited by like who's on the state contract. And thankfully, like a lot of the school products are, but not necessarily everything. So, and then there's limits to that. So it's working around that contract system. But we kind of do a hybrid thing in my office where even if we go to bid, we're limiting that what the product is. So you're not just opening up to anyone, providing you anything, and then kind of having to vet it and work with the client to figure out on the end, are these chairs comparable? Like, does this one match this one? Are they equal in ergonomics and durability? We kind of dictate up front, like, here are your three things that we've already vetted, that these ones, here's your basis of design that we know that we want, and two that we will accept. And that is it. So we kind of control exactly what we're getting. It's not a perfect system. Ideally we would love to just go, work with VS and get the VS chair, or work directly with Smith Systems and get exactly what we want. But for me, it's always been very hard because it's not always up to me of how we can do that. And so there's, working
Okay.
within the parameters that I have, we try very hard to kind of make our own rules to like make the system work for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I mean, you're 100% right from what I've been hearing from everyone. It is so dependent on each state and what the requirements are. And then obviously sometimes the districts have different preferences
Yep.
in there. Yeah, and I think that's a piece to me that is probably like the next wave of the conversations that
Maybe the
become,
next wave of improving how do we do this? Because
yeah,
there's
of the how we do
opening
this.
people's
Because
minds.
yeah, because I do think that that's where we're at right now. Like this is the moment where we need to have the discussions of like, is furniture a commodity, or is furniture an integral part of the learning environment? Because the reality of it, like, if you have to put three equals on there,
Yes, they're
um
never equal. They're as equal
yeah,
as you
they're
can.
never quite equal. And if you start mixing and matching, it doesn't have the same design intent, where if it was all the basis of design, or if you can say, hey, this is exactly what I want,
Yep.
um you can actually pick that, and the district can actually pick, this is what we want on there. And that's why, like, yeah, if I'm going to put my experience on it, is like, man, when you can do that, you're going to have a much better result. You're going to have this collaborative approach. You're going to know exactly what you're getting. You're going to know the pricing up front. You're going to say like, hey, we are not going over budget, and we can now decide what is the most important thing. So if we want to put more of our resources into a certain
Yep.
part of the school, or certain ones, we can now like collaboratively make those decisions, versus putting a bid out and then trying to piece it all back together once we get all these bid prices
Yep.
back.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely would help them, you know, maintain the level of what you want in the end, which I feel like sometimes like, and not, our struggle is sometimes not everyone really understands the value of the furniture, no matter what you say. And everyone has, their things that they think are the most important, whether it, be an architectural item or, something for the custodial, like a very expensive piece of equipment for the custodial. And so it's, it's weighing those things where everyone kind of comes in there with their own opinions. And so furniture is not always like the top priority for everyone. And, sometimes it, we get we'll just use the existing like chairs and desks and they're all attached to each other and it's fine. They're in good condition. And you just think like, no, please. Like, let us figure out like a way to work with the budget and work with what you're getting. And if you can truly get what you want in the end, like that would definitely help them. But it's always that struggle of like not everyone sees that furniture as the priority based on whatever they're coming to the table with there.
Yeah. So
Yep.
is the biggest obstacle, if I'm hearing you right, is more of like the education of the client?
I would say, yeah, the education of the people that make the decisions, not necessarily,
Okay.
it's not always teachers who are making decisions. A lot of times it's, people that are part of the building committee, the board of ed, superintendents, like, they all kind of have a lot of influence because they are the ones that make the financial decisions. So, it's us bringing our expertise to them so they understand that this is something valuable that they should be putting their money into and why, right?
Yeah. What, from your point of view, what would be like if you can wave a magic wand to make this better, or to, to make sure these projects have a bigger impact? What is it? What's the biggest thing that you think is getting in your way?
I think honestly, like people just are very unaware of the furniture world, right? Like they don't really understand what is available to them or the why behind furniture design and how the classrooms function. I feel like a lot of times, like a board of ed or a building committee is parents or people that are retired and they're kind of doing this as, on the side. So a lot of times they're not even working in the schools or they're not necessarily like seeing what it's like living in those classrooms. But I feel like a lot like the people that come to the table don't necessarily know all the stuff that we deal with on a daily basis or necessarily the stuff that the teacher's dealing with on a daily basis. So some way, if there was a way to get more education out there to that tier of people that are invested in the schools, I think it would really help, people, not only us, but obviously the schools and the school
Yeah.
systems and all the way down to the students, because those people would be advocating for it at that level and earlier on than even like the architects and designers are involved in a play, and they're putting this together to get the funding for these projects in the beginning. If they set that as a priority before it even becomes a project, I think that is key in getting, you know,
Yeah.
better
Yeah.
furniture.
Yeah. I always think, I'm like, it's in a lot of ways it's almost like a cultural shift. It's like how do you, yeah, how do you,
And but to generalize, a lot of times like people on the building committee are older because they are, they have more time, they're retired. So, and they don't know what's happening in, current furniture design or classroom concepts. And, a lot, they're not, there's a lot of people who are educated, but sometimes they're like, I've had the same desk back then. Like, what's the matter? That attitude.
yeah.
And you're like, oh, no, let me tell you, let me explain why. It's
Yeah.
some of those things that you do encounter, which can make
Okay.
you laugh,
Yeah.
also just make you frustrated of like, oh,
Yeah.
come on, you can do
Uh,
better.
yeah. All right. So that's a good perspective, because that's what I'm, yeah, like in my mind, like I'm only dealing with this all the time. So maybe we still do need to drive home more of that why and show it, put it in a bunch of different formats for them. Because I'm
I
always
think
trying to think, I'm like, like, is it, like
parents, I think
yeah.
parents is a key player because they may not be the ones that are making the decisions, but I think they definitely can have a voice in what those decisions are, and it is directly benefiting their kids. So I think I don't know how they would get educated on this, but I feel like that's probably a missing link of like people that
Yeah.
don't necessarily know what's
Yeah.
happening.
All right, you're hitting like one of my passion points right here. Did we talk about the nonprofit and the docu-series last time we talked
I
that
don't
we were working on?
think so. That doesn't
Okay.
sound.
All right. I'm going to tell you about it. Okay. And you could, but that was one of the things that I'm like, you know what? We really need to bring the communities on. Like we're working on this more from like the industry side, but wouldn't it be awesome if it was more the demand side of like the communities were
Yeah,
coming to the
yeah.
school saying, why aren't we doing this? So our team just spent a lot of time thinking about like, how do we like what does make those cultural changes? And we kept landing of like, it's like it's the media and entertainment industry.
Mhm, mhm.
Like most like major movements and things that have happened, it's because there's been like a movie or a TV show or something. And I always come back to like the show Fixer Upper with Chip and Joanna Gaines. Like super entertaining
That's
show.
not everyone has farmhouse like aesthetic.
Exactly. Everyone has shiplap on their walls now. Like they completely changed like the way like homes in in the US are designed. And so, yeah, so we've been trying to look through that and be like, well, how do we do that? How do we do it in an entertaining way where it's not, like just for people who are
Or
normally interested
already
in
invested. Yeah.
schools? So we started a nonprofit with with other partners, and we're always looking for more people to come along with this, called Second Class Foundation. That was that's really rooted in how do we improve education through the use of media and storytelling. And one of the first projects we were doing is we found this amazing film crew to do a docu series, and they did the first episode, which is really powerful. It's really well done. I would definitely recommend everyone watch it. It's not that long. It's like 9 minutes long, but it hits home. Like really of like yeah. I've heard people say it's heartbreaking, and I'm like, yeah. Just know that's the first. That's only the first episode.
Sometimes you need that, like a little bit of that,
Yeah.
painfulness to like get the point across, right?
Yeah, I keep saying like we have a mapped out like 10 episode series. And it's like every good story, it has to show the transformation.
Yes, yeah,
So the first one is really heartbreaking, and it's really like kind of showing a really dire need of a school in Idaho. But our intent is to weave other stories in around the country and show like others, like, I mean, Cranston School is a great example of you look at some of the things that they're doing in that district, and to be able to showcase, be like, look, this is what some schools in the country are doing and
yeah,
some
yeah.
districts are working towards. Um, and being able to weave some of these stories and these narratives, but really wrapped around really good character development in there. So I know it's a big
Sounds
picture
amazing.
thing. I mean, I'll show you. Yeah, I mean, I'll send you the link, but secondclassfoundation.org is for the listeners, and we can put the link in there. But yeah, I keep coming back to that. I'm like, I don't know how else to get other people in to it other than trying to meet them where they're at. And the intent is how do we put content like Netflix quality
Right,
types of
right.
things that when they're sitting down at night saying, what am I going to watch? They
It's
actually watch something like this.
the TikTok world and the, Instagram
Yeah.
reels and getting that
Yeah.
so that you're sharing it. The next person is sharing it. And I have no idea if I
Yes.
can like start that momentum, but like that, that's like the world. It seems like everything is like spurred from, right? But like,
Yeah.
how do you get that going with beyond just our industry?
Yeah, yeah. So digging into like what you do on an everyday basis, you
Mhm.
have a very good working knowledge of like what products are out there and the why behind it. I mean, what are the things that you wish other people knew or had the viewpoint, either if they're just starting out or they haven't done as many schools or like,
I think it like for me, like going to ed spaces and really seeing and having that like not just having like a sales rep come and kind of give you the pitch, but like really seeing the furniture and feeling it and sitting in it. And like it's amazing how that actual small act of like bringing a sample chair to a client and having them sit in a student chair that is ergonomic and does have movement, and they instantly get it. Like they're like, oh my God, like this is what the students should have. I understand. So I feel like anyone who's new to that, just like getting out there and like seeing the furniture in person and like hands on and testing it and sitting in it and like just getting involved in that, like seeing it in person. Like there's so many things, like pictures and images of classrooms and all of that you can see online, but I feel like it doesn't really resonate until you're trying it out yourself. So that to me is like step one. If you're going to do school design, like go to ed spaces or go to showrooms or go to a factory tour, go and like see, get the spiel, but also get to test it yourself so you understand.
yeah, what was the moment for you like when it clicked? You're like,
I think, like I'm a VS person, so I love our VS dealers, Robert Lord, and they are fantastic. So working with them, our VS rep, and just I distinctly remember when you say video, like David Stubbs, the video that they had done of like I was school in Hawaii, and just how transformative it was, and then going to their factory and seeing that in person, and then not only just understanding the why behind the the design and like how the classroom functions, but also like the integrity of how the furniture is made, the durability, which is huge in schools. Like that's a huge thing. They get this furniture usually once for 50 years. So how is it going to hold up? And is it going to be suitable for kids in a high school who are like rough and tough on it? and like just being able to like sit in it and test it and see like how this is made and how does this really benefit the school on, a very wide variety of ways, whether it's budget or, like I said, durability or comfort or flexibility or, future proofing for how does this evolve over time. Um, they were very integral in that for me, of just kind of getting that message, and that it's not just being dedicated to them, but then seeing how does that work with other people and how are other
Right.
companies evolving, because I feel like in the past 10 years, like definitely in the past 15 years, a lot of other companies have come along, and a lot of other companies have definitely evolved what they're offering for furniture. um I think following in that trend, right? Like there was
Yeah.
not a lot of the same stuff back 10 years ago that there is now, that you have way more options for what you can do with the classroom, sit to stand desks and chairs that are different ways of sitting and those things, and just being excited for what's evolving.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. I feel like that story component of really that understanding of the why behind it is so important.
Sometimes
Yeah.
in that, to me, I remember like distinctly in that video, I think it's not just the furniture, right? Like it's showing the classroom that the kids are sitting on the floor and they're like
Yeah.
having like a soft spot where they're, leaning against the chair or sitting underneath the desk. So it's not always like the in the box that you're picturing of like, how does this desk work? But hey, can someone sit under this? And now all of a sudden it feels like a cozy spot, and they're leaning against a soft seating in the room. And how are they using that differently? And it's not just about the one function that you think that that piece of furniture has, but how can that whole classroom kind of be a inviting and exciting place for kids to be engaged?
Yeah. Yep. Love it. Yeah. And that to me is like a perfect example of like, man, like there are these resources that just so desperately want to help on these projects, that to be able to work with them and bring people in and do that. Um, how often do like how how often are you either approached, like what's it like from your point of view when people are calling you about furniture or you're trying to learn about furniture? Because one of the things that I've been learning from these interviews is that the furniture world can be confusing, of like who are the distributors, who are the manufacturers, who does what, like what are the contracts, like who has access to what. Uh, have you figured that out yet?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I feel like I know that more so just because of working on the school projects. I don't think it's as, the people in my office that do furniture for higher ed or corporate don't really understand that as much as I do, because I constantly have to work with bids and who is a dealer and what's a manufacturer and what manufacturers are on state contract and with who, and like that
Yes.
level is a little bit more intense, I think, in like the public ed world than it is in other areas. So I feel like I do have a good understanding, but sometimes it's hard to tell what's the sales pitch versus what is the genuine, and you kind of have to like just do your research and be open minded, but also keep those questions in mind of like sometimes you just see, well, maybe you just copied the last person's because they're so successful, and so is that really what your furniture is bringing, or like it's just kind of being aware of I don't know, the whole spiel behind it. Sometimes it's not always all just about like the furniture in the classrooms, but sometimes it's a sales pitch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like that, I've been in the furniture world, on this for 15 years now, and there's definitely, there are definitely people who like are in it and care about it, and I would say a lot in our industry are, and then there's some where it is clearly they're just trying to sell stuff. Um,
But I
and
think on my end, making sure that your client kind of understands the integrity of the products that we kind of are promoting,
yeah,
and the dealerships and the manufacturers who do have their best intentions and want to be there for the long run, versus, and like why that might be something that you're selecting versus somebody else that might be less expensive, or why
right,
you're selecting one company or one chair over another,
yeah,
and that it's not for on us, it's not just about the sales pitch, but there is that whole breadth of reasoning behind it. So,
yeah,
it kind of helps us to understand all of that behind the scenes, because it's very hard to sell the why to your client without understanding the difference between, the whole spectrum of every chair that's out there and like what sets one apart from the other.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Completely. It's a yeah. I think this is another one that I'm like, and I think the furniture industry, and I'll put myself in that category of like, I think we can be doing a better job coordinating and and yeah, and not making. I mean, I know there's always going to be a competitive component to it, but
Mhm.
I know enough of like the people in this industry, and the best ones don't have that competitive mindset. They have this collaborative mindset, and that's my hope is that like we're genuinely in this because we want to create better learning environments. Like that is
Yeah. And I
our
think
goal.
that those of you out there who have that passion, that comes through, right? Like it's very easy to see who's passionate about this and versus like what is just a sales pitch.
Yeah,
That passion is definitely a driving force that resonates with on the design side, at least for me.
yeah, yeah, and that's what's the part that's encouraging to me is that I think the ones that are like really getting involved like at a deeper level of this, whether it's in the A4LE community or the ed market, and the corresponding conferences on there. Um, what what else are you looking at? Like what are the things that are either headaches to you or and then I'm gonna ask you the converse there when we wrap up.
I am going to say 100% every project, every single time. Budget is always this biggest struggle. You know, sometimes you are very limited on what you have. Sometimes there's other things that get pushed into the furniture budget. So it's not just your typical furniture. So you're dealing with a lot of different aspects. And um, I I feel like that, and as prices are rising and things are more expensive, but sometimes those budgets haven't increased to, deal with inflation. That's always a struggle on our end of how do you provide exactly what you think they need when the budget's just kind of feels like it's fighting you all the time. And like, where is it that you can kind of pull back, or like, what can you do so that you're not compromising the integrity of what they're getting in the classroom or what the students are getting for furniture, but how do you balance that with like keeping on budget? That every single time is the hardest part.
Yeah, how are you seeing like the budgets be assigned? Are they
um,
taking percentage of the job costs, or are they looking at like per square foot or some
yeah,
other
a lot of
metric?
times I'm not involved when they're set, but I think
Yeah,
at
they
least in
just
Connecticut,
give you that budget and say this
yeah,
is what you
usually
cannot
I'm
go over.
yes. I think the way they do it in Connecticut is it's a certain amount per student. And so
Okay.
if you're student like if you're, you have 600 kids, 600 times, I don't know what the number is, whatever that number
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
and then that's what you kind
That's the
of get
budget.
across the
Yeah.
board. We've had challenges where they're like, oh, we have 600 students, but really like the school is planned for 800 students. And you're like, well, that budget didn't actually cover with the
Yeah.
new school, that covered your existing school. So, and then it's those challenges. But I think for me, it's always understanding what is that budget in the first place so that I can really like think about what's the best thing that we can do. For me, it's always what's the best that we can get them, the most that we can get them within that budget that allows them to have like the greatest school possible.
Yeah. 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 All right. Now on the positive side, what keeps you going? What do you love about this work? Like what are the things that get you excited about or really
I think
find fulfilling?
first of all, this like having other people, like I feel like it's been a newer thing for me to like after doing the ALEP and being a little bit more involved in like the that world, that there are other people out there who are doing this too, and like people that are excited about it. So I'm so excited about that because usually being the only one in my office for the past 10 years that worked on public ed, I felt like, I have other designers and other firms that I know, but like there's not that community for me. So like having a community now has been fantastic. Also, like so many of these schools haven't been touched in 50 years. And when you see what their classrooms look like, what the chairs that they're sitting in, that like, oh, the art teacher has a closet. She doesn't have a classroom. She has a cart and that is it. And when you're working on these projects and they get to see that like not only do I have like an entire classroom, like it's full of amazing things, like that excitement is the best part. Like what the possibilities of what those teachers and students and like community have, like that is the best for me. And like that's why I kind of decided that like public ed really was like my favorite thing, because it was just so different than doing like a corporate job or working on, you know, like a higher ed. They're like amazing, cool projects. But for me, like that transformation that you have when you go from a school that literally we've had them where, you know, the ceilings are crumbling on them, the walls, the doors don't work, the windows don't, you know, like there's all these things that they're living in these horrible spaces. And when they ask you, like, will I be able to turn on the lights in my room? Or can I come into my classroom and like not have to wear my coat in the winter? And then you say, well, of course. And then also here are all the other things that you could have, like your, you know, here's the furniture options, and here's like how this space is going to work. And here's like the view of the, you know, forest outside.
Right.
They get so excited. And that to me is the best part, like
Yeah.
that end
That,
user. Yeah.
that's really
Enthusiasm.
cool. Well, thank you for the work you're doing, because I do think like you're finding, like you said, the community. I'm totally with you. I mean, this community of it, it's there is a like a specialness to this of like this type of work that is just different from other sectors, and
Yep.
it's really cool to find this community that does genuinely care about it and kind of give that like extra attention to it and recognize like this literally is life changing. Like how lucky are
And it
we that
reaches
we get to do
everybody,
work
right?
like this? Yeah, like entire
Everybody has been to
communities.
school. Most everybody you know has a connection with school, you know. So I feel like it's like everybody gets excited about it because they understand it. Like it's
Yeah,
a part of
yeah,
everybody's life for the most part. So,
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I appreciate that. All right. Anything else I should be asking you that I didn't ask you about?
oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, you know, I could keep talking, but
Yeah,
yeah, I just think it's exciting that in this time that there, like I said, there's motion, right? It's moving forward and it's just getting better all the time, and more education and more information out there that, you know, broader communities are understanding about this. And it's going to make not only the schools better, it's going to make our designs better. It's just, yeah, a lot to come that's exciting. So,
yeah, very cool. All right. Well, to the listeners, if you have not hit subscribe wherever you're listening, just hit subscribe. And betterlearningpodcast.com is the hub for everything. I mean, this is our community. So it is, you know, like being able to really look at this, figure out how we can do it better, but then also, you know, like having that broader view of like, yeah, learning environments are a big part of this, but it's also like we're looking at education as a whole of like we all are recognizing we want to give the best opportunities for every kid, and it's pretty cool we have a community like that that we get to interact with. So, Amanda,
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
The views and opinions expressed on the Better Learning podcast are those of myself as an individual and my guests, and do not necessarily represent the organizations that we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.